Here we've got a slightly bigger specification. So we've got 4 bullet points on our specification. We've also got some bullet points underneath which say amend the code to do X, Y, and Z. Now, what basically is going to happen here is that you are going to make sure that the program does all these things by fixing these errors, adding in output messages, making sure that any errors are corrected as they suggest as you go along. One thing to watch out for is if it mentions any inputs or outputs, then you've got to go back up here to have a look, and also if it's talking about for the messages, and also if it's talking about validation, you need to also check, well, what kind of validation is it? Does it need? What are the numbers and what's the range? Sometimes it will tell you, sometimes it won't. Okay, so that's what it's asking you to do. Let's have a look and see if we can break down the program and get it working. So this is question 3. We've got a bigger specification of 4 bullet points, and we have 4 amend the code elements that we need to sort out. One thing to always remember with questions 3 onwards is that the bullet points at the top for the specification link to the bullet points at the bottom, so this is what it needs to be able to do, accept only numbers from 1 to 20, etc. This is how you get there. Okay, so that's giving you a little bit of support. This is, and if there are any messages or any validation, you need to look at both of these to try and work out exactly what you need to do. So it says accept only numbers from 1 to 20 inclusive. But the first thing it also asks me to do is fix the runtime error caused by inputting a valid number such as 4. No other validation is required. Well, let's see if that's something we can do something with. So I'm going to try and run it, and I'm going to put 4 in. And there's your runtime error. It looks like it has crashed. So let's see if we can fix that first of all. I'm just going to clear that out of the way. So if we have a look at it, num equals 0, so that's okay, but it crashed the moment I did that. Well, that thing, num equals 0, tells me that it's an integer variable, but here input always stores things initially as a string, so I've got to convert that to an integer. If you're not sure how to do that, then look in your PLS. If it had to be a decimal number, it would have to be float. But in this case it's int. Watch out for your brackets. Remember that in idle what will happen is that it will close the brackets and highlight things for you. So let's see if that's fixed that problem. Okay, so that's fixed that issue. I'm just going to put a little comment in here just to say what I've done. So force storage string input as an integer, and perhaps later on in the mark scheme it might give me marks for putting comments in. I'm not sure at this stage, but it's a good idea to do that. The next thing it says in the specification, having ticked that first one off, is fix the logic errors that cause incorrect or no inputs for acceptable numbers from 1 to 20 inclusive. So it looks like it's not actually working. So it should give me even if the number is even. It should give me odd if the number is odd. So let's just test that out. So 4, it doesn't give me anything. Should have said it was even. 5, it doesn't give me anything either. So there's something strange going on with that. So let's have a look at this line here, which should be responding to particularly my even bit. If num //2 is equal to 0, and that's a bit strange. Now if you looked in the PLS, you would find that // and the percentage sign have got something to do with integer division. Let's just see what they do. So if I do 5//2, that gives me 2. If I did 5%2, that gives me 1. Let's try that with a even number. So 4//2 gives me 2 again, but now what's happening if I do 4%2? So that gives me a 0. So what the // does is gives me the result of an integer division, just a whole number, but the percentage gives me the actual remainder. Now if you divide a even number by 2 and there's no remainder, so the remainder is 0, that means it's an even number. So remainder 0 is an even number. So let's just see if we can alter this slightly. I'm going to change that to a percentage and see what that gives me. So I'm going to change it to, let's try 4. Okay, brilliant. So that's now starting to work. That's now starting to develop. So it looks like that's starting to bring itself together. Let's have a look and see what happens if we change that thing to a percentage as well. And we want to test this with a number that's odd. Still not quite working, so it's still not there. So that didn't fix it. So let's go back to where we were and have a think about what's going on. So if that is even, well, if it isn't, then it must be odd. So we can actually change this slightly. We don't actually need all of this stuff here. What we need is simply to remove that and change it to an else, because if it's not even, it must be odd. So let's try that again. Great. So now it looks like we fixed those logic errors on bullet point 2. The next one, fix the logic error that causes the program to execute even if a number outside the permitted range is entered. Well, the range is 1 to 20, so let's just see what happens if we try and enter in 40, which is well outside the range. It's still going. So we need to somehow stop it from working. Now, in order to do that, we need to think about what's happening here. If it's doesn't have a remainder or a remainder of 0, then it's even, otherwise it's odd. So how are we going to stop it from going any further or actually executing this stuff if it's actually outside the range? Well, what we can do is we can think a little bit about validating the data in terms of its values, in terms of its range. So what I'm going to do is just pop something in here just to see if I can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if the number is outside the acceptable range, and the range is 1 to 20. So what I can do is I can go if the number is less than 1, or the number is greater than 20, then it wants me to print a message, and let's have a look at that. So because I need to make all the output messages match the requirements, so there's my message, it's print invalid output. There we go. So let's just try that. So let's go for the same thing, 40. Okay, well we now know it's invalid in output, but we're still getting this thing responding. Let's try 0 because that's also outside the range. Okay, so it knows it's an even number, but it's invalid output, so we're still getting that problem. So all we need to do is somehow connect this all together. Well, when you're connecting an if statement together, that is actually a really simple thing to do. So if that is my validation, if I get past the validation, I need to do the next bit. Well, with an if statement, the next bit is always elif. So now what it's going to do is it's going to, if it's outside the acceptable range, it prints that. If it's acceptable, just put a comment in there. So if number is between 1 to 20, we need to check for even or odd. So let's just try that now. So we're going to start with 5. Okay, brilliant. So that's perfectly acceptable data. Let's start up, let's do something like 50, because that should knock it out. Brilliant. Let's try 4. That should give me odd. Sorry, that should give me even, of course. Now let's try outside the range. Perfect.